One of the most difficult things to do in orchid care is repotting an orchid. And that's only difficult because it's probably not something that you've done before. It's something that is totally new, and when it's new, it just freaks us out. So in this video, I'm going to go over the steps that you need to take when you repot your orchid and when to know it's the right time to repot your orchid. The first thing you want to do is to make sure that it's the right time to repot this orchid, that you're not going to go out on a repotting spree and repot everything in your collection at the same time. Repotting is the one thing that makes us nervous, but it's also the one thing that can make orchids extremely sensitive to their environment and often put off a bloom for that year. So make sure that your orchid is in the right time to repot. There are several indications that it is the right or wrong time to repot, and you can go through one by one. For example, oh gosh, yeah, take a sniff of that. If it's strong and there's a good earthly smell and there's a not so good earth smell. That is a not so good earth smell. That means it's time to repot. You can already smell that potting media going sour. It's not something you want. The second sign is if you press down on your potting media and it sinks. I mean, it's decaying already in there. If you do a repot right, it shouldn't press down. There'd be no resistance. See, when I press down right here, the entire orchid just moves. That means that all this material has been in here so long that it's decaying in the pot. It's not holding its firmness anymore. The third reason is that your orchid is not adapting well to your potting media. Now, I chose this orchid to repot first because it's a Phalaenopsis, and I want to start this repotting series with a phal. I'll go through the other orchids in time. So with this Phalaenopsis, I know that these roots are bad inside the pot. And how do I know that? Well, the leaves are starting to split. They're wrinkly. They're dehydrated. I mean, the orchid is wobbling in the pot. You can see that. This on the outside of the pot, don't worry about that. That's normal, especially with terracotta pots. But you can see there's visible signs of dehydration. If you repotted this orchid in less than a year, don't repot. Give it time to react to this new potting media. Orchids take time to adapt, to really feel their environment. So if your leaves are going dehydrated like 2 weeks after you repot, that's normal. They had a lot done with their roots. They had a lot that they didn't like, and they don't like to be messed with. So give it time. If they've been in that pot for more than a year and they're still dehydrated, then it's maybe time to change that potting media. Sickness. If you know your orchid is sick and it's not recuperating, and you know that you've tried all the products, maybe the problem is in the roots and it's not adapting because it doesn't have a good root system. So you have to take it out and look at those roots, and that's what we're going to do in this video, because this orchid is not sick probably, but I bet there's hardly any good roots on it. So that's why I chose this one. If I chose a nice, healthy, plump Phalaenopsis, there wouldn't be much to show. But when you repot, make sure you have all the ingredients necessary before you start, because it is a pain to start the whole process. Oh no, I forgot this. And then you go call a store, or you have to go out and get it. So make sure that you have all the ingredients necessary. So the things that you'll need are a pair of scissors, something to sterilize those scissors. It could be a flame, it could be alcohol, it could be any type of thing that will actually clean those blades of those pruners. Cinnamon, a fungicide or a bactericide. My suggestion is Phalaenopsis because that's available for me. I know a lot of places in Europe do not sell that. You can try what is in your area too. I'm going to use sphagnum moss, and you will need distilled water or reverse osmosis water or whatever type of water that you use to repot. So those are your ingredients. Now, if you don't know what type of pot to pick, I suggest this video up here because I go over how to choose the right pot for you. I know this orchid has sick roots, So I'm probably going to cut them all off. In a normal situation, what would I do? I would measure an inch or two. Usually for Phalaenopsis, it's an inch or 2.5 centimeters larger or wider than the original pot. If you don't have pots, I strongly suggest to go to the orchid supply store, because especially for their mini phals, they have the little bitty cups. I mean, pots. These are awesome. These are so hard to find. So check those out. So I'm going to probably using one of these three, depending on the size of what's salvable inside my pot. Don't always go with one pot, because sometimes it doesn't fit. Sometimes, I mean, I could be totally wrong that this orchid does have good roots. The problem might be somewhere else. Inside my potting media, I'm going to be adding orchid bark. And know your brand of orchid bark, because some have to be soaked before, but the one I'm using from Orchideria, it doesn't. You can actually use it straight out of the bag. If you want to sift it, you can. I didn't find I had to. The next thing I'm going to add is charcoal. Sphagnum comes very dry in the bag, so what you want to do is hydrate that for at least 30 minutes in water. Now, I've had mine soaking for a little bit, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up and squeeze that water out. I do not want this water inside the potting media. I use a lot of sphagnum just because my climate inside my office here is so dry. You need to measure these out according to your climate. So don't go following my recipe, or I don't even know if you can call it a recipe. You need to find what, I was going to squeeze it here. You need to find what works for you in your environment. I add usually about half bark and half sphagnum. That is a lot, but you know, I do keep my air conditioner on. I do keep my heater on all times of the year. So you're going to want to mix this extremely well. You do not want to add big chunks, small chunks, big chunks, small chunks. For example, big chunks of bark and then smaller chunks of perlite or smaller chunks of charcoal. Because what happens is in between the bigger chunks where air is supposed to flow and the water is supposed to drain, those smaller pieces of perlite and charcoal are going to fill those gaps. So you're going to have a pot that is extremely low in airflow, and it's going to retain water a lot more. So make sure all your ingredients are the same size. So my potting mix is ready to go, and now it's time to clean this orchid. If you have a plastic pot, what you're going to do, you're going to squeeze it all the way around, go around squeezing this pot so that you're applying pressure on the roots to kind of shift just a little, not enough pressure to break them. You don't want to break the roots. You just want to apply that pressure. Now on the terracotta pot, that doesn't work. So what you're going to do on a terracotta pot is soak it. Just soak the whole pot in water. And this is actually a good idea too, because when the water interacts with the roots, they're going to change colors. And that's the easiest way to know if the root is alive or dead. Once you squeeze it, you're going to note that the orchid comes out a little bit more. Now, mine is not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly pull out the sides of this and go around loosening this potting media. Be as gentle as you can on this phase, because the orchid has no idea what's going on. The roots are probably attached. And oh, the smell. Ow. Aha, there it came out. And this is, yeah, even the potting media is stuck in that. The pot that you had, you can reuse. Just clean it out very well. So put that away. Oh gosh, the smell. So let's get rid of all this old potting media. I mean, even the sphagnum moss is turning black. I don't know if you can see that. So get rid of this and throw it away. If you want to use it for your compost pile, this is great, but it doesn't really serve for anything else. Now to the cleanup, and this is exactly what I had expected. Look at those roots. What you want to do is go through and really clean out all that sphagnum. See this long root here? This is the velamen on the root. It's a thicker outer layer. The actual root is this one right here. Thinner is like a little wire, and the velamen covers it. See, the velamen you can take off like this. This velamen does, it allows water to enter the root system, but not exit. So that's why if you overwater, the water just keeps going in. The velamen works like this because orchids aren't made to go in pots. They're actually made to go, most of them on trees. So they need to maximize the surface area that they have that comes in contact with water. That's why they have this velamen. And even in the humidity in the air, the velamen will pull that humidity in and keep it in the root, and then the root will bring it back up to the stem of the orchid. So you're going to go through here and you're going to look at each one of these roots. If it's green, leave it alone. If it's yellow, leave it alone. Yellow roots just mean that the sunlight has not entered the chlorophyll near them, so the yellow roots are probably going to be in the middle of the pot. Leave those alone. It's the brown roots that you're worried about. So you're going to go through each brown root and you're going to squeeze. If there's resistance, keep it. It's alive. The velamen is actually dead, but the root is alive. So you're going to go through squeezing like this. Is just paper. I mean, this is gone. This is brown here, but green here, and it's even starting a new root tip here. That's perfectly fine. Leave it. This one is brown, no resistance whatsoever. Even when I squeeze it, it has a paper bag crunchy sound to it. Take that off. See this one here, it looks kind of dead, but I squeeze it down and it's firm. It's firm as a rock. Leave it. It's fine. So I'm going to go through and do that to each one of these. Now this poor orchid probably won't have much left after I'm done with it because it is in a horrible state. For these little thin wires here, I do not cut these off. I leave them. I leave them on. Even though the velamen might be dead, there are some authors who say that this thins, I think it's called steel, but I have to check on that, that it's still alive. So keep that. It's better to lose the velamen, and it won't absorb, of course, as much without the velamen, but it might absorb something. So better to keep it. It's not going to decompose inside that orchid pot. You might be asking, why don't I just leave this velamen on inside the pot? Well, the problem is this velamen right here is already dead. There's no reviving this. Once it's dead, it's dead. In nature, this is going to be on a tree like that, and if the root dies, it just falls off. So it's not going to stay there and decompose and attract all these microbes and bacteria and fungus that are going to decompose even more. It's just going to fall off. But in your orchid pot, it doesn't fall off. There's nowhere to fall. So it just stays in the pot, and this will attract all kinds of bacteria, and your pH is going to drop rapidly, and then your whole orchid is going to suffer. So now your orchid is at this state right here. Now that's still mushy, dead. Hold on. Oh, no, that's squishy. Take it off. Looks like this was a root, but it didn't make it. And that's all I have left. I'm going to get this orchid and I'm going to spray it with my fungicide. Now, I use Phalaenopsis 20, as I mentioned before. What you don't want to do is use hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is not the best, and I'm not going to explain why, but you can see a video up here about that. And stay away from hydrogen peroxide unless you're just cleaning the leaves. The leaves, it's fine, it's perfect. Keep using it. On the roots, hydrogen peroxide isn't the best. I am going to spray it in the middle here because I see a little brown spot. Aha, now you decide to work. Thank you. You might see like a blackening here. If you can take that ever so carefully and remove that, that's awesome. What you don't want to do is open a new cut in the stem. So make sure, like, if your nails are really sharp, that you're not hurting this. You know, and you can actually get in and remove any spots. And of course, you know, if you want to use gloves, you can. I don't. Do wash your hands. So now it's time to put this in the pot. Going to measure your orchid inside the pot. Make sure the roots are like spread out. They're not all in one place, and do this gently. You don't want like all the roots on the left or all the roots on the right or all the roots in the middle. Try to spread them out just a little bit. And you can see here what I'm trying to do is get the height of this pot exactly right. So here's the stem of my orchid, the base of the stem right here. I don't want that down in the potting media, and I don't want it way up high either. I want it just level to the top of the potting media. So that's where I want my orchid, and I'm going to now put my potting media around it. So here I have my orchid, and I gently place the potting media around it. And you might think, okay, I'm done. No, you're not. You're going to move it away, and you're going to tap it, give it a little shake like a hurricane shake, and squeeze it down. Is this going to hurt the roots? Yeah, it is. But you need to press that potting media root down and make sure it's stable. And see, like right here, I now know I can add more. And just keep that potting media pressed down tight. You want this tight, like a snug kid in the bed. You know, get those blankets, snug those blankets around those feet. I did not stake this because if this orchid is going to send out a flower spike in the state that it's in right now, it won't be the best for it. So I'm going to forego the flower spike and cut it off while it's in development so it can really focus on getting new leaves. I prefer this orchid to have nice, healthy leaves than to have a flower. The potting media is right level at the base of the orchid. It's not higher, it's not lower. If you go higher, that potting media is going to come into contact with the orchid, and that plant cell tissue on the outside is going to decay. It's not made to be in, you know, touching something else. It's not. It's made to be on that tree with airflow all around it. It's made to be free, and it doesn't like close contact with anything. So get that potting media away from the stem. There's nothing wrong with just coming in with your finger and moving it away. So this is probably higher and that's lower. That's fine as long as your orchid is stable. This leaf here, because it's in contact with the rim of the pot, is probably going to have issues on that. But this leaf is going to fall off in a couple months anyway, so I'm not worried about that. So here is your orchid. Should you water it now or not? This also is a divided opinion. Some people say yes, water it now. Other people say wait, it's not worth it. If your roots were fine and healthy inside that pot and you did very little cutting on them, water it now. That orchid will need the water to recuperate. Water is healthy. Water is like the #1 medicine in the world. If you could just take away all the medicines and just, you know, drink water. Same applies for the plant. So use that water, water it now, water it abundantly, and make sure your potting media drains well, because we really squished it in there. So you want to make sure that it drains. So that's how you repot a Phalaenopsis. I won't need to repot her for the next 3 to 4 years. And she can grow inside this pot well. She's not wobbly. And I hope she recuperates with these dehydrated leaves now that she's got rid of all that old sour media. One of the first things that you need to know is when to repot your orchid. You do not want to go out on a repotting spree and repot everything in your collection. If you like this video, please give it a like, but don't go away yet, because I want to suggest these 2 videos right here. One's about choosing your potting media. The other is about choosing the right pot for you. And if you have any questions, please add them in the comments below. And I hope to see you in the next video. Happy cultivating!